Welcome back to It's Lit Book Reviews. With me today, as always, is Luke Evans. I'm Charles Dance, and today we are talking about Bram Stoker's Dracula, the legendary classic written in 1897, I believe. Quite a long time ago.
What a time the world was in.
I mean, if you were living in 1897, you really had it going on. So real quickly, obviously, I'm sure you've heard the name Dracula. This is the original book that the character spawned from, and so many other stories, movies, shows, different books. Like all of vampire lore stems from this book.
Yeah.
And from the father of all vampires, Count Dracula himself. So just really quickly, it's got 1,197,197 ratings on Goodreads, and it's got a 4.01 overall. I gave it a 5 out of 5. What'd you give it?
I gave it a 5 out of 5 too. That's crazy, dude. That Picture of Dorian Gray has a higher rating.
I cannot believe that. I
mean, I
you
can't
could
remember
show it
how
to me and
many
I wouldn't
million.
believe it.
I know Dorian Gray had a couple million, right? Or at least had 1 million reviews, I think.
Yeah, if I remember correctly.
So that's just crazy that
these
books were written around the same time. And how does that have a better review? I mean, night and day, different experience.
It's got 300,000 more reviews and it's not much higher.
4.2? What is it?
It's 4.12, and this is 4.01. So it is higher with hundreds of thousands more ratings.
Oh,
so
for sure.
that is wild to me as well. So we both obviously really liked it. Let's get into it, my friend. What are some of our non-spoiler thoughts? We'll do that first because...
Dude, hot take. This is a book I would read every year.
Yeah, I don't...
in October or something, if you're trying to get ready for Halloween, because it's an easy read, especially with the Audible also being so good. Because we Audibled... Do you Audible all of it, or do you read it?
I read a little bit at the end.
So I did probably 50-50, which I had Audibled it before, and that was what kind of got it on our radar for us to do, just because we did Dorian Gray, and we're like, oh, wait, Dracula's on there, and I remember I liked it a lot, but it was a couple years ago. So we ended up doing it, and it's just the voice acting, which I'm sure we'll get into more, is fantastic in the Audible edition of Dracula, but I got the physical book this time and read half of it, and it reads just as fast pace, I would say, as the Audible goes. But I guess now that we can easily compare it to something in its time, so different than Dorian Gray, dude, and in every way is way better.
You can still sense the old writing style is very similar, but it's just way better. It's better presented, better delivered, all that stuff. But I audibled most of it. We kind of had this idea of continuing to read what we read, and then we started with Dorian Gray, and now we're doing this where we're audibling classics. Just kind of, we both work, so it's easy to listen to it while we're driving around or just working.
So I would recommend this one for sure.
Anybody.
The Audible, Audible to anyone, because you'd like it. But then especially reading it, like I said, I genuinely think I might try and because it's so easy and quick to read, on a weekend or something. That seriously, dude, it's just such a good book that I would read it again. Because again, I'd already done it, read it or listened to it before, and it was still just as good. Yeah,
and not that I'm at all an expert on late 1800s, early 1900s classics, but this one seems it's a legendary classic for a reason, and you get that sense pretty much immediately just from how...
Dude, first chapter.
So
good.
So
one of the best first chapters. That's one of my notes that I had. One of the best first chapters I've read in a long time. If you're not counting a prequel where it's or a prologue where you're what's happening, and then once you've read this book, then you're oh dude, that was sick then, but in the moment you're this means not what is happening. This, because I guess it's not that same style, you're just oh wow, I'm in.
I'm in for sure.
But
so yes, I would say definitely recommend it to anyone, and especially because you kind of mentioned before we started, because at first I was thinking we shouldn't even try to do a non-spoiler because it's Dracula, but you made a good point. I don't know why I didn't think it. I didn't actually know this story.
Yeah.
And it's...
really, Dracula.
Yeah, you know Dracula. You know what he is. He's this powerful vampire. He's the first one. But the story itself is in a lot of ways way more than you think it is, but also way less. Like, you might have this idea that, like, you know, this like ridiculous otherworldly stuff happens, which it does, but on such a subtle degree that it's like so cool and isolated, which I loved about the book.
It's more believable, honestly.
Oh yeah, you're like, is this a nonfiction book?
Exactly, yeah.
Especially the way it's presented.
Oh man,
let's talk about that.
Yeah. So that's especially non-spoiler. It's written as it's like primary sources that you're reading of like either letters or diary entries or like newspaper articles. And like honestly, like if I would have known that, I mean I can't remember if I knew that going into it the first time, that probably would have like turned me off, honestly, because like that's probably not done well. But he does it so well to where it's so engaging.
So well.
It's so engaging, like rereading all these manuscripts and stuff. And so anyway, what were your thoughts on that? Do you like it?
I loved it, dude. Not the same as you, like, because I've never read anything that's that style or that, you know, presented that way. So I would have thought the same thing. I would have thought, oh, this is going to be like kind of weird and choppy. Like I would have, like my first thought would be, oh, that's going to be choppy and like hard to follow. But it's done so well. Like even when it skips like a day or two, because you get to the point where you're keeping up. Like, oh, okay, the book started in May. We're in October now. It's been this many months like since this happened. So it's just for a lot of reasons like that. You keep up with the time really well to the point where, especially later in the book, when it does happen where a couple days are skipped and that first thing you hear is saying the date and you realize, oh, it's been 3 days, you're like, what's about to happen? Like, I haven't heard from anybody in 3 days. So I loved it. And it gave it like there's just so much dynamic to that, because especially the different ways you're getting it. So we talked about like sometimes you're getting letters between two of the main characters, which some of them are in one place at the start of the book and some of them aren't even there later, and that kind of thing. So you're getting the way that some people talk to each other, which is established early in the book because they're kind of talking about some frivolous things, like with Lucy talking about, you know, men that had proposed to her or wanted to go out with her or whatever. And then obviously that's not what the book is about, but you get like this cool kind of building of who these characters are, and then you get that, but then you also get diary entries. So you get kind of these different versions of these people, like who they are when they're just writing to themselves, who they are when they're writing to their friend or their husband or whatever.
And you're getting like gaps that they don't have as a character. That's what's cool too. Right. He writes it's so creative to where, you know, a character is talking to another character, but you've already read before, either a diary entry from another character, like, and then this other character's like, I don't know what's going on with so-and-so, but you already know. And so like they're still trying to piece together stuff, but it's almost like you already know the answers. Right. But it still is just as satisfying, like even though you know like what's going on, watching them kind of figure out what's going on. Right. It's just so creative to me. Well written, and then the characters are still so like he connects them all so well. Yes. Yeah. Which like I feel like it's so tough to do with the way that he writes this, but I guess he just is so creative, and maybe that's why he did it this way, and he knew that he could do it in a really well-written way, so it illustrates that in a better light. But, I mean, they're all so connected, you don't feel like characters are isolated, and then in the end, it all brings them all kind of together in a way that you're not expecting, and that you can't really see, I guess, too, because you're so limited on the information that you know. Yeah. But
which is perfect for this book, because some stuff could be easily ruined as far as the intrigue. Yeah. So yeah, I love that part of it. I loved it. And it just makes the characters like, and it's because he writes it so well. Like, it just makes the characters so relatable, and you feel so much for them, because you're like, especially in the diary entries or people writing to their lover or wife or husband, whatever. I mean, you're getting like this very intimate understanding of where their heart's at, where their mind is at. Yeah. You get a really good feel for that time, which you can get that from any piece of work from a certain time, but he's writing it in a way that describes how people would be and how they talked, both in private and in public, and how I think there was a little bit of a cool thing on, like, I would think, wow, these people are so like honest and like with themselves and with like each other about what's going on. Like, for the most part, there's intentional times where they're not keeping things from each other, but just, you know, where there's times where certain things aren't being said. But yeah, so I love that. It made me love the characters even more. And again, just to talk about the Audible, I've only listened to like 3 Audible books in my life. The Audible actors in this made it so much more real, man. Like, even just down to like the inflection of the voices for the different actors made them their own character. Like it was so cool. And then you would have like if you're getting a POV from like Mina Harker and she starts talking about what Van Helsing said, that voice actor will go into like
her
what
version
that
of
character's
what she thinks,
impersonation of that guy is.
Yeah.
So it just, man, it was really good. The Audible is so engaging. This is something I would recommend not only to anyone just for the sake of how good the book is, but if someone came to me and was like, man, I want to get into reading, but I only have time to listen, like I would immediately recommend this.
Yeah.
Like this is what will get you into it. If you can, and finding more stuff like this where they really put a lot into it, which I'm sure a lot of classics and more well-known books are like that.
Yeah.
Because they know more people are going to listen.
So just for context, there's multiple voice actors in this. So for each, so there's 5 different characters and there's a different voice actor for each of those 5 characters. And like Jesse just said, when, like if it's, you know, a girl writing, you know, she uses her normal voice when she's like talking about what she did during the day. But then if she interacts with another character and she's saying what they said, like Jesse said, she like has her own version of them talking. So like it just makes it so clear as to who's talking.
Right.
Like so it makes it really easy to follow, but then like you said, like it just adds like layers to where it's not like just the same monotone guy like reading every certain thing. If it's a girl voice actor. If it's a guy voice actor. Yeah. And then like them being British makes it cool too, obviously.
Yeah, of course. You just love listening to it anyway.
Oh yeah.
And not all books could be done this way because
a
book like the first book I really audibled, which was that Genghis Khan book, like it's a nonfiction book that's pulling from like a document that you don't even know if it's fully accurate. So there's no opportunity to have a bunch of different actors portraying people because that would have been super choppy. You would have had one person chiming in and then back to the monotone narration. So it is a book that can be served well by a bunch of great actors, voice actors being on the Audible.
That was written perfectly for that.
Yeah, like it was like Bram knew. Like one day there's gonna be a lot of people recording this.
One day
for people to listen in their ears. So yeah, that's kind of I guess non-spoiler. I mean, synopsis. Like if you don't know, like it's hard to say anything without spoiling it. But it is if you've never known the story of Bram Stoker's Dracula, it's way different than you think, especially if you've seen some of the media adaptations and things like that, which we'll talk about a little bit later. It's not the story you expect. It's much more...
It's more just common fiction, honestly.
Yeah, like it's
not
just
super fantastical.
No, it
which
feels
you wouldn't
real.
think that, yeah. It's not Twilight, where like the whole thing is based off of...
Yeah, you're dealing with very real characters in one supernatural, wacky thing. That pretty much
and it's
nobody
almost like
of
a
the time
mystery.
understands.
It's more mystery where they're trying to figure out what's going
is.
on, which it doesn't like have mystery as like one of the genre like tags, but like, I mean,
what
I
are
can
the
see
genre
that.
tags?
So it's classics, horror, fiction, fantasy, vampires, gothic, paranormal, which I saw where like it's like one of the main like gothic. It's like one of the early ones to start that gothic like theme.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So synopsis of it is obviously Dracula, the father of all vampires. You basically have one of your main characters have an encounter with him in the beginning of the book, and then over, what was it, a 6 or 7 month period, you get the rest of the story through that character and others. Yeah. And they're basically trying to understand what's going on. You know, they don't realize, it's hard to not spoil it, but they're trying to solve the mystery of Dracula and things that surround him and the actions that he takes. And it's just really cool, man. I'd recommend it to anybody, especially the Audible, especially if you maybe don't like to read books as much and you're more geared toward Audible. You're driving around a lot or you're able to listen to stuff while you're working. This is perfect. Yeah. It's really, really perfect.
For sure. I'd love to meet someone who's like, yeah, I didn't really like that. Just to hear like why. Yeah. Because it's so, especially if they're doing the Audible, right? It's so easy. And the chapters are kind of short. They're only like 30 minutes a piece. And I mean, it's really not. It's like 15 hours, I think you said, if you just listen it to 1 point speed, which, by the way, today I was on 2.25.
Yeah, let's just say that, too. You ripped through the majority of this book today.
Yeah, I read, which it is thicker than, like, Dorian Gray was only a couple hundred pages, whereas this one, my edition, like, Jesse and I have different editions, but mine's 410 pages. Yeah. And, like, the word break isn't, I mean, it's like your normal, it's not necessarily...
I mean, it's like a normal book. I mean, it's not like.
So, but I was only on chapter like 5 at the beginning of today, and there's 27 chapters.
Yeah.
And so I had to really crank it up, dude. But I will say, especially when, this isn't a spoiler, but there's one character in particular when he was going like, oh, I could almost do like 2.3. Because his was really like it was so easy to catch.
Yeah.
Jonathan Harker's was tougher. I had to bump his down like more to 2. But usually I don't listen to it that fast. Normally I'm like 1.6 or 7.
Yeah, I listened to it when I audibled most of it, and I did 1.3, I think, all the way through.
Yeah.
But I did spend a lot more time. I mean, I listened to it for about 5 days or whatever, however long.
Yeah, you listened to a lot of it and then kind of slowed down because I was like behind.
Yeah. And I was reading other stuff that we'll have videos for soon.
Exactly. But dude, great book.
Great. I mean, highly recommend to anyone. It's not only a great story, it's like a really great, if you're gonna do a classic that's not gonna like really bog you down in the literary devices and the old English style, like themes and all that kind of stuff, like drawn out dialogue.
Yeah. Which is crazy because it's basically all dialogue.
Yeah,
with oneself, but it doesn't feel that way.
Right, it doesn't at all. And a lot of this probably is because the Audible was so good. Yeah. If I had never read it before and just read it as a book,
dude, I will say I was
reading
it.
Different.
No, dude, it wasn't.
Because I only read the book at the end.
I read like the second half of this. I read probably like almost 200 pages of this, and maybe 2. It's just because I've heard the Audible. Maybe that kind of helped, but. Dude, no, like it reads so quick, like especially because there's so many little breaks where it's like, all right, here's this document and then this document all in the same chapter.
Right.
So anyway, but yeah, I liked it. I think this edition's so sick too.
Yeah, I like yours a little more than mine. I will. Let me just real quick.
Jesse bought an edition. It was only $10 on Amazon. I mean, look at it. It looks like a coloring book.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
It's like paperback, but. It's huge. Yeah. It's so big.
So I went by the bookstore yesterday with the lady, and we bought some books, and I saw that one bargain price for like $4, and I was like, oh.
Hey, your favorite bookstore?
My least favorite bookstore. I only buy bargain price from Books A Million. Because
shout out to Books A Million, because I'm sure they won't make it to 2024. Yeah,
this will be like
I honestly
talking about them will
be
a
surprised
relic at that point.
They're gonna be. I don't see how they make it.
I don't either. Like it's just turned into which. They've also taken out, at least the one near me, I'm sure a lot of them are similar, they've taken out, like, all the benches, any seating area, the coffee shop they had where people would come in and work and read their books, because I guess they thought, I don't know who at Books A Million HQ thought they were losing that much profit percentage off people reading books in the store. You think that the coffee would help,
though? Like, that's probably...
Well, I think the idea was they thought people were coming in there and just reading books and putting them back and not paying for them. I'm like... Who goes into Books A Million and sits down for 7 hours and reads an entire book and then puts it back?
And it's just, all right, if they do, they're probably going to buy a coffee.
Yeah.
So you're still making money off the coffee.
Making more money than you would if they just didn't show up.
And like some little croissant.
Yeah.
But maybe they're not making money. But you'd think maybe that...
Well, now
was it Starbucks? What was the store? It was like Costa.
Joe Muggs.
Joe Muggs. So they're probably paying them to be in there.
They're not anymore.
Well, yeah. So what's in that area? Just books now?
Well, now they like rearranged a lot of the stores, so like all the magazines and like the classics, like the whole classic section is up there where I got these. And not only that, it's like, okay, so you take all this stuff out, you're trying to make more money. Half their store is bargain priced, and then the other half of the store is toys and shirts and coffee mugs.
Like not even.
It's like a novelty store now. It's like, what is this for? And then I'm, as you know, if you keep up with these videos, I'm more into nonfiction and history, bro. It's gotten smaller every time I've gone in there.
Oh, it's so bad.
And all it is now, all the history section is, which these books are great. It's books that everybody and their mom has heard of, if you read it all. It's all the history books that are like foundational, which they're foundational for a reason and they're great. But you can go to another big chain bookstore without having to even get into the better options like a Second and Charles thrift store or thrift books online or just a local bookstore. Support your local bookstores if you have one. But Barnes and Noble, it's day and night, bro.
Oh yeah,
Barnes and Noble. It's their history section is like bigger than my room. Like it's so solid. And it's so much. There's obscure stuff, and especially for me, like I'm not trying. Like I've read a lot about, say, the Civil War. I'm not trying to walk into the history section of a bookstore and find the most like popular Civil War books that have ever been written. I want to find more obscure stuff because I'm trying to learn about things I don't know. And they only have the most popular stuff, like bestsellers or stuff written by big authors, which, again, I like all those
but
things.
Even then, they still, like, I mean, I know they have, like, the main stuff, but...
There's a lot they still don't have.
Oh, yeah, because there's just so many historical topics, so...
Yeah.
I would say they probably have a lot of, not a lot, but U.S., but I feel like their international, like... European history is probably trash.
Oh, it's
when
trash.
I went there,
like
I couldn't find any.
2 shelves worth, like 2 rows.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of American history, but then half of like the American history, for instance, is like
dated
12 different versions of the Federalist Papers. And it's like, what is this? Like, it's just very strange. So anyway, enough on those.
That was a quick round
about the Books A Million. It sucks. Don't buy books from there. I only did because there was bargain price stuff, and we were out. She wanted some books. I wanted to see what was going on.
It's fun going to bookstores too. That sucks that they're kind of declining. Barnes Noble is all we got here. I feel like we don't really even have a local bookstore.
Yeah, did all that out.
Yeah, for sure. But back to Dracula.
Okay, enough on non-spoilers. Let's dive into it for real. FR. So where do you want to start? You want to start with some themes? Should we just go into characters maybe?
Yeah, I mean, like you already said before, I think the biggest thing, like after reading this, dude, the first chapter is just so good. The build up to him like going in, and you're kind of like unsure at first why he's even going there, or like where he's even going.
Yeah.
But then like everyone's kind of hitting him with the like, sketch stuff, and then he's like, oh wait, what?
Asking him like, are you sure you want to go over there?
Yeah.
Like, stuff like that.
And then even when he first gets there, you're just not really sure how it's going to go down. And then obviously, like, he realizes he's kind of trapped. But that is the one thing I was going to ask you, dude. I still, even reading it a second time, I tried to go back and look. I can't really remember how he gets out. Like, I know he climbs down the wall to, like, get some documents or whatever. But, like, I know he gets sick. But, like,
yeah, they don't
what happens?
They kind of leave that part, like... If I remember correctly, like, they leave it, like, a little open-ended, but, like...
Yeah. I shouldn't have you picked up on something that I didn't.
No, I didn't, because, like, it goes
So why does Dracula let him go, is what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
I don't know if...
Does he kind of need him for, like, the legal purposes? I couldn't tell.
Like, for getting the house or whatever?
Yeah, because I feel like you already had the house.
I don't know, because it makes it seem like Dracula's whole thing is to, like, get whatever he needs from him and then basically feed him to his wives and whatnot. But that doesn't happen, obviously. But I do think it kind of leaves a bit out as far as, like...
Because he sticks up for him, kind of. I mean, I know he has him trapped, but that's still what I couldn't figure out if I was, like, missing something. And I was audibling at the time because the book wasn't in, and I kind of wanted to go back and read it. I just haven't had time just to see if I pick up on anything, like, actually physically reading it. But that's what I couldn't tell, because he sticks up for him when they try and kind of kill him, when he falls asleep, when he tells him not to fall asleep out there. But anyway, that was the one thing I was going to ask you. But again, first chapter is just phenomenal.
Yeah, it's so good. It's just so intriguing.
And so much happens.
Yeah, a lot happens in that first chapter. And it's so eerie because going in the book, okay, Dracula's a vampire and he's a bad guy. And this dude's just sitting in his house talking about London and, like, getting a house and all this just, like, casual stuff.
Yeah.
But then they also skip over a lot. Like, he'll say, like, we talked for 6 hours into the night. And you're like, I don't know what that conversation was like. And then it goes from Jonathan Harker's story back to Mina, like her and Lucy. And then next thing you hear about Jonathan, he's like, Mina's receiving letters.
So yeah,
from
you think
that
he's
nurse.
dead? Like, for a while, it's like he's probably dead.
Yeah.
Because she's like, I haven't heard from him, and they were all those letters that Dracula had him write out, like, and telling him specifically what to say. So she's getting them, and she's thinking they're legit. But you're like, rip to my boy John. Yeah. But then he's still alive.
He starts really manipulating him. He's like, sign this, write this.
Tell him you're here. Give the date a month from now.
And then he tries to write one letter, and he's like, this thing's not, like, dated and said who it's to be sent to, so I assume it was never meant to be sent, and it doesn't matter if I rip
and it
this
wasn't
guy
you,
up.
right? Yeah, we know it wasn't
you. You wouldn't have written
but this other one that you wrote.
Yeah, he's like, this one's fine, because it doesn't out me. But this one, you didn't do that, did you?
And he's like...
And it's just... It wasn't me. Nope. It wasn't me. He's like sickly and like seeing the devil. And
there's literally no one else there. He's like trying to find someone else and he can't.
But it's super creepy, and that's like, which is cool. And this is in a lot of parts of the book, but I'll just say it now. Like, just one section of the book, like that first bit with Jonathan Harker and Dracula's castle, it makes sense why there's so much media. Like, there's a movie that came out just about the voyage of the Demeter. Like, there's so many parts of this story that could be a full-length movie or series and could be fleshed out beyond the book, because it's just so interesting. Like, Dracula's castle, bro, like, There's so much more you could have going on with that.
Like how he even got there, his prequel story. I mean, there's so many things.
He makes a few mentions, like when he gets mad at one point at all them, like kind of towards the end of the book. He's like, bro, like I have risen and destroyed armies in my time. He said, I've led men he's basically saying I have basically founded human civilization throughout history. And like helped humans get to where they are, which is kind of a crazy thing because it's like
he's flexing, but
it's like you get this perspective that like, oh, Dracula's like hurting the flock in a way. Like he's making sure humanity survives because he needs humanity to survive.
Oh yeah,
like he's got to feed.
True.
But anyway,
it kind of makes a little inference too that like he was a man. I feel like there's that one chapter where Van Helsing like kind of hints at like his origin, that like maybe he started going to some like sorcery type of thing because he was like this great leader, military leader.
Right.
Because then they talk about how he got buried, where he, like I guess he dies and gets buried, but then I guess whatever he was mixing into, you know, he was able to like obtain these powers. Yeah. Which I don't know if you want to talk about that next, but the powers that they have is so interesting, and
there's like levels to it,
but then also like how they're just so easily hindered though. Like they're strong, but then like the whatever freaking wafer this dude has, it's like, where are you getting these wafers, bro? Because they're OP as hell. I mean,
these vanilla wafers are crazy.
Because tell me how him throwing the wafer into Dracula's little dirt box, he's like, it's soiled forever now. And I'm like, can he not like get someone to just take that wafer out?
Yeah, that was my thought. Is it like just like it's touching something, just like it affects that room forever just because its presence has been there? I don't know, but it's like a wafer is like and one of the main themes that we can get into is religion and superstition. So that's kind of a big part of most vampire lore is like a cross, holy water, garlic. Yeah. The wafers I've only ever seen in this book. Like I felt like I had heard that before, but it had never. Like it occurred to me.
I couldn't really even tell if that like actually meant like a. Yeah. Like he's throwing vanilla wafers in there, bro.
Yeah, he straight up got like rolling out a plastic pack of vanilla wafers with the logo on
it. God!
He's like,
he just puts it in his circle.
He's never coming back.
Like, puts what's her face in his circle and it's like, I can't leave.
Yeah, it is funny that you say that though. Like if it does have to physically stay there for it to work, and it's like, you know, a freaking raccoon comes by and eats it, and it's I can come back.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Or like what he did to Renfield, just kind of convinced someone to be your like little henchman, and then
that reminds me of another movie that I have to pull up
about Renfield.
No, just a character that's in a movie. Oh, dude, I can't wait to talk about the renditions of this. But anyway, continue.
So, I guess we talked about the beginning stage, and then the second stage is what's her fate? Mina waiting to kind of hear back from old Johnny Boy, who you think is maybe dead or whatever, and now you find out that there's a ship that like came into shore from that region, and you're like, okay, this is probably Dracula, and then you start realizing, wait, what's going on with Lucy? Because that sounds kind of sus.
And before you even get into that, this is where, so after the Jonathan Harker bit, you get a bunch of back and forth between Lucy and Mina, and this is where you get the majority of like the social structure of this book, and you get an idea of like, and it's from two women that are both like engaged to be married, Lucy to Arthur, and Mina to Jonathan. But you also see that Lucy has other lovers, which end up being like the other main characters in the
boys,
book,
dude.
Which, and just talk about this briefly because it's not a huge part of the book, but it is important because it establishes not only who these characters are, but how like the character of the time is.
Oh, they're all gentlemen.
They're just all gentlemen, man. Like three dudes just get or two of them get absolutely rejected, and they're like, I honor that. Like if you
He's
want
like,
this
you
other
proposed
guy,
to my girl, you're my brother now.
Yeah, it's like,
it's like
you love her
Arthur's
too.
like,
I love you and I would die for you. I would do anything for this woman except anything that would be like nefarious or like you know, whatever.
I mean, especially because freaking Dr. Seward's like having to stay in her room like at night, you know?
Yeah.
Which any other, like, obviously you know what's going on in the book and you kind of get the vibe of Dr. Seward before all that's going on, but
yeah. And it seems so to
Colleen Hoover's making it where John Seward, it's getting reckless.
They're not
dude.
lasting long.
Dude. She's going to be in one of those poly relationships or whatever they call it these days.
Well, and that's what I was just going to say. Like, marriage, especially like super traditional like relationships between men and women, like not even to talk about sex, but just the way they view each other and the way they view love and life together. Yeah. It seems so antiquated now, but reading about it from the perspective of someone that lived in that time, like how people talk to each other and treated love and other people, it's like, wow, like,
and how Mina like really trusts Jonathan, especially like towards the end when he's like, when they're like revealing or withholding her from like information from her, like in the first part when they end up bringing her back into like the circle after she gets savaged by Dracula. But before that, they're like, all right, you've already helped us so much, but we don't want it. You're a woman and this, you've already been through enough. We're going to protect you. And she's like, I want to, and like in her thing, she's like, I want to help, but like, I understand he's like doing this. Like, she's just so understanding.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
And you don't get the vibe that these are like freaking, you know, bros. They're like, oh, women can't lift big stuff or fight. It's more like, yo, you're a woman and you are like, the way they viewed women was like, you're to be cherished and taken care of. You shouldn't even have to think about the horrors of what we're gonna have to deal with. So it's like more of a like just wanting to protect her soul kind of thing from like what they're about to have to deal with. Like they felt like men should take that on and carry that with them. Which,
well, I will say Van Helsing does. He's quoted and when he's talking, because they all like just love Mina, bro.
They love
They're all
her,
like,
dude.
they have nothing
she's
but bad
great.
things. You know, she is great, but they have nothing but bad. They're hyping her up at all times. And then Van Helsing's like, she was blessed with a man's brain and a woman's heart. She is the perfect being. And I'm like,
whoa.
He's like, man's brain, woman's heart. Perfect.
So yeah, you get a bit of the social stuff. You see that like Lucy's got a lot of prospects, but she's like totally loyal to the one she's already chosen, which is Arthur. They both love each other very much, and I will say like this is laced throughout the book, but I never like cried, but like there were a lot of moments where I felt like the emotions well up in my face, and a lot of it was just the way they talked about their love for each other. It's like, wow, dude, like these people would really just die for each other if there was no other option. They're like, if I can't be with you, freaking shoot me in the face alongside you. Like, which is a little drastic, but it just kind of goes to show like how much they were committed to each other. Even before they were married, they were like, I made this decision, and no matter what happens, like Mina.
She doesn't hear from him for months, dude. She's like, I still love him.
The second she hears about him, she's like, all right, I'm on a train, and I'm going to go nurse him for a while. And this is like, they're not even married yet. They get married while he's in a sick bed.
Just in case he dies.
Potentially about to die. Just so she can die like as his wife. Or so he can die.
And he can probably, she gets his, probably inherits stuff too.
Yeah.
She's like protected
that way. And she gets before she dies. Like, super important.
Sure.
While he's in the sick bed, just like barely able to see, like sweating, pale as all get out. He's just like, I don't know if I can get up for you, baby. Dracula got a hold of my soul.
Don't mention Dracula
already.
As the nun's like, at first, dude, when you were reading about the nun, did you think she was, I don't know why because she's like, yeah, don't bring up this stuff. Yeah. At first, I'm like, why?
Yeah.
I mean, really, which I get it, but like, when you look back, it's like, oh, I guess I get it, but it's like, whose side is she on?
But again, it goes back to the superstition, and like, also like, there was a whole thing about inviting Dracula in. So I can understand how like, you don't want anybody to even know about this, because what do you think of when I tell you not to think of an elephant?
That he can't go into like somewhere if he's not invited in.
Yeah, there's like a whole thing with that, and like he achieves that by basically putting people like kind of in a trance and like hypnotizing them essentially. So he's tricking them into doing it, but it makes sense. It's like we don't even want people to have the knowledge that that's one of like the ways that he accomplishes tasks, because then it's likely to happen even more often. So which maybe you could argue the other way, but again, it goes back to the theme of religion and superstition. Like, they didn't even want to talk about it. They almost wanted to try to act like, we'll deal with this, but when I'm done, I want to pretend like this didn't happen, and I don't want to talk about it, and I don't want other people to know it happened, because if we don't talk about how it happened, maybe it didn't. Maybe we can forget about it.
Arthur, or is it Arthur? Arthur and Seward, I mean, they like take a long time though to even kind of, like what you were hinting at, I think in the non-spoilers, how Van Helsing like knows what's going on but doesn't tell what's his face, because he knows like, because I mean, he even like kind of blatantly shows him all these facts, and he's still not putting the pieces together, and he's like, well, I'm going to tell you this is how it is, and he's like, dude, are you doing this? Like, he's doing it.
Yeah, Seward is so confused.
And he's like, all right, so no matter what, they wouldn't have probably believed anyway, so that it makes sense why he had to kind of do like sprinkle these crumbs to get them to see exactly what's going on.
And it's reiterated at the very end of the book with Jonathan Harker's last entry, where he's like, we've come to realize now, like, years later that all we have is like our own personal entries and
Oh,
no
we
one would
can't
believe
prove
this.
Yeah.
And so I think from Van Helsing's perspective, he's like, this is so unbelievable. It'd be way easier if they came to the conclusion themselves and I'm not having to convince them of the existence of a vampire, like basically a demon on Earth. So yeah, that was a really cool facet of it as well.
Yeah. Did you see?
And Van Helsing, man, smart character. I mean,
oh yeah,
smart guy.
Which I'm glad that they. Which I mean, I haven't really gone and seen the Van Helsing movies. Like I know what they're about, but
It's Wolverine.
Yeah, is it not Vin Diesel?
No, you're thinking of like Riddick or something. Yeah. It's Hugh Jackman.
But anyway, I need to rewatch those now because now that I kind of get more context, anyway, it's just kind of cool, like name drop that they've like adapted. Like what you've already said too, though. There's so many like elements of the story that you could just take just the one element and make a whole. Like I mean, like I was just saying with Renfield, like you could make a show just about Renfield.
Yeah, and it's so cool how so many aspects that Bram Stoker put into Dracula carried over into all those things, like. Most of those renditions across is still a problem for a vampire. Holy water, garlic. And then you have some renditions where like, like in an anime or something, like a guy tries to throw a cross at a vampire and he's like, brother, are you kidding me? And then slices him to bits. So they obviously veer away from it in some ways, but it's still a thing that at least people think will work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was just really cool in that sense. And then, so where are we exactly? So, okay, so then we get to the Demeter.
Well, I was going to say before that, did you see it coming like with Lucy? Like, I mean, it gets pretty obvious like after a certain point.
No,
but,
I mean, at first, no. But once it gets obvious, you're like, oh, this is how like it's about to tie in a lot of characters together. Which,
but did you think she was going to become a vampire? Or did you think she was just going to die? Because I think when I read it, I was like, oh, she's just dead. Like, she's going to get killed. Like, they're just not going to be able to save her.
Yeah, I guess I did feel like, okay, somebody's definitely going to be like the fall guy or gal. So I did start to feel like, oh, Lucy's definitely going to be that person. And it works so well, dude, because you come to love Lucy's character as well. Like, she's such a sweet gal. Like, she means well.
Yeah.
She's a lot like Mina. She's a little more like...
She doesn't have a lot of time either from her POV at least.
She seems a little more like maybe frivolous a little bit. Or maybe that's not the right word, but a little more like...
She's a little more
free-spirited, maybe a little more ditzy, romantic, like not thinking about like because Mina's made out to be like a very well thought. Like
she's like
character.
Trying to memorize stuff so that she can help out Jonathan.
Wherever she's at, she knows where every train is going and what time it leaves. It's like
she's like, I'm gonna practice memorizing what everyone says and then writing it down.
Yeah,
to like
that's not a man's brain or a woman's brain. That's like an alien, a computer brain. She's an AI.
No, she's a mentat, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out Frank. So no, I didn't see it come up once stuff started happening and Lucy's or Mina's noting that like she's like super pale and acting weird. I was like, oh, okay, Dracula might be getting at this girl.
Yeah.
But that whole scene where Mina runs out after she can't find Lucy and sees her like out on like the near the cliff or whatever on the water, and you get that visual image of Dracula like bent over, like standing up, and he's over behind her, like sucking her blood. I mean, dude, it was like chilling, that scene. Like thinking of Mina standing out there by herself in the middle of the night, and you just see Dracula, and you're like, I mean, he could slaughter her right now if he wanted to. But again, he doesn't want to act in that way because, and I like this. I like a story where like nobody can be OP. If you have an OP character, it's just not as fun. You're like,
no, I agree.
I love OP characters, but at the same time, I hate them for the sake of a story. Like I love thinking about an OP character like Superman, but it's like, bro, the only thing that can defeat you is a rock from a planet that exploded. So it's like the odds of you getting beat are slim.
Yeah.
So, because it's just harder to make those characters compelling, and Dracula has a lot of weaknesses, and it starts to make sense. You're like, man, he's been alive for thousands of years, but he hadn't conquered the planet yet. Like how?
Yeah,
and it's because he's got a lot of limitations that could kill him easily. But you also get the sense that like, oh, he's lived this long with all these limitations. Like he is smart. He's got backup plan after backup plan, and he knows what to do.
The whole dirt thing was kind of interesting too, which you wouldn't think it, but it's just like a cool element that he adds into where like he has to have that dirt there.
Yeah.
He can't just be anywhere.
Yeah.
Like these little dirt boxes are like his little safe havens.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's very cool. And like, I also like the fact, and this is kind of jumping a little bit, but well, no, it's not, because the Demeter comes up. Like, he takes huge risks by being on the water.
Oh, yeah.
And he has to take a lot of risks to accomplish his task. So it's like, this is still a vulnerable character, even though he's powerful and he can kill everybody on a dime if he really wanted to. Like, there are ways to stop him and defend yourself.
Like, if they had, like, some garlic and apparently a rose, which I didn't know that either. Like, you throw on a rose on there.
Yeah.
They could have stopped him. But, yeah, dude, the Demeter chapter was one of my favorites, too, dude. Which, I know you said the Demeter movie, like, has bad reviews, but I'm, like, intrigued now to go watch it.
Yeah, just because we've read it, I do want to see it while it's out. It's bombing at the box office, though. Like, bombing. It and the Nick Cage Dracula movie that came out, which is actually called Renfield. It's the guy, Nicholas Hoult, I think is the actor that's the title character.
Why is it called Renfield? It's from his
perspective. It's from his perspective. Like, it's about him being like, and it's a different take on it. It's more like of a silly kind of take, like where.
It's a comedy?
It's not, I think it's like a comedy that's violent kind of thing. I don't know.
I don't like that at all.
I mean, it looks like kind of just a funny movie, but the same company, I don't know who it was, like Warner Brothers or something, had that movie and Last Voyage of the Demeter, and they both are like Demeter's bombing right now, and Nick Cage's movie bombed really badly. So, which kind of makes sense. Like the same way there's like superhero fatigue right now, and with like Marvel movies and stuff. Like I can see how there'd be like monster fatigue because there's just been a lot of vampire stuff, and so if it's not something really good, and I mean, I am interested in seeing The Last Voyage of the Demeter, but that movie did not look that good.
It looked demonic. It looked more like that's not what I imagined Dracula looking like.
Yeah, and the reviews I read were like, this is just like
bat thing.
Yeah, they were like, this is just a really violent movie. That's like all you're going here for. Like,
there can't be much plot line if it's just on the ocean, and it's just one by one each person.
And that's literally what one of the reviews is. It's like you literally get to know a character and then they're dead, and one by one they all die. Which, if you know the story, you're like, okay, all these characters are dying.
Yeah.
So
it is crazy though how like he's doing all this stuff and no one's really like. I mean, I guess it's tough to immediately assume like, oh, supernatural, whatever, because it's like he does a good job of painting like a world where like no one's really thinking that, at least in England. Like I know when he's in Transylvania, everyone's like, oh no, don't go there. But
bro, you got holy water on you.
Yeah,
like, be careful.
But once they go back to like London and in England, like it's not that way. So they're like, nah, what happened? Like even after like that, reading the bottle of like what the dude had, where he literally just binded himself to the wheel. They're like, yeah, he must have gone crazy and killed everybody himself. Yeah, like no one even knows. Like
even
no
the
one's
captain,
even thinking that.
Even the captain on the ship, once the last guy throws himself off the ship, the last guy he's there with, he's like, oh, he must have done it.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't believe what's going on until he sees something, and then he doesn't write anything else because he's dead. So, yeah, the Demeter was really cool because you are, like, trying to figure out, they're like, why can't they find him? They're on a boat.
Yeah.
But then you find out later he's got all these boxes, he's got all this stuff. And then the last guy who throws himself off the ship ends up finding Dracula in the box.
Yeah,
like he says it, but then the captain doesn't believe what's going on.
Yeah, if the captain would have helped him, they could have maybe.
Yeah,
which I don't know if they would have known the whole time thing. Which that was another different thing, because Dracula could be out during the day, but it was only until like noon. I think was that what it was? It was like noon till like.
Yeah, it was something weird.
There was some overlap.
I thought he couldn't. I thought it was. It's like he can be out during like sunset or dawn, but once the sun finally rises, like he can't. He can't be out. So like if there's like a little bit of light of day, he's good. But once the sun's like high in the sky, like he's done for. So anyway, that's the Demeter. The Demeter happens, and then there's a little bit of the Gazette stuff in there where you see these news articles about the Demeter, and then about that dog, like the wolf or whatever, like hopping on shore and like going ballistic.
What was the purpose of that wolf breaking out and then coming back? Like I know he breaks into the window and does something to Lucy.
Yeah, I think that was Dracula. Like, I think the idea is supposed to be that is Dracula, like, trying to, like, make his way in.
So,
like,
but the dog goes back, right? The wolf goes back to the zoo. So, it was the wolf never left the zoo?
I don't know. See, I'm not sure.
I didn't even think about it until just now, because remember the guy's like, I don't think he even left. He's just scared, like, somewhere around here.
Yeah, like, I got the idea that maybe Dracula was looking like that, so people would think it was this thing from the zoo.
He broke it out.
But then the other one was just scared and nobody saw it because he actually saw Dracula for what it was. Because dogs always know what's
covering
going on,
himself,
but they can't talk.
Yeah.
Like they always see the ghost and they can't tell you. But yeah, that part was cool. But in one part that like didn't lose me, but I was like kind of confused at first, was the part with like the kids getting cuts and stuff.
Yeah,
that was thrown in there and then like not mentioned much again. I was kind of confused about that for a minute. I was like, who's this lady that like did this? But I assume it was one of the wives that was.
Oh,
like,
you didn't think it was
stuff.
Lucy?
Oh yeah, it was Lucy. You're right. Yeah.
Okay.
You're
I was
right.
gonna ask you that if you thought it was Lucy. The only thing I didn't get,
Or I guess it was Lucy. I don't know for sure because they don't.
She was definitely one of them
specifically
because she
answer it.
freaking yoinks a kid and then
Yeah, you're right.
Van
You're
Helsing
right. Totally forgot.
saves the kid, kind of.
Yeah.
But that and then the irony of just everything that happens when they're just doing everything they can to save Lucy, bro, and it's just. Dude, the mom takes the flowers,
I mean,
or like,
the mom, bro.
It's like that, and like, is there not locks on these windows? What do we keep leaving the windows open
Yeah,
for?
and why are y'all like? I mean, Van Helsing's acting like this is the most important thing that's ever happened in human history, and he's got dudes just falling asleep in the middle of the night. It's like, bro, you need to have about 20 dudes over here, 4 of them in the room at a time.
That, and then you got a nun taking the cross from like stealing, or not a nun, a servant taking the little thing to protect. It's just so many things.
Horribly inconvenient. The fact that Lucy's mom is
time.
super sick and they don't want to tell her what's going on because she might have a heart attack. It's like,
God.
of course she can't have a healthy mom that can handle bad news. I mean, god dang it,
bro. And our boy Arthur's taking L's, dude.
Oh, bro,
because she dies. No, Arthur's the one who.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
But they don't even get to get married.
Yeah, they don't get married.
They don't get married.
And that was one of the parts that made me like tear up a lot was when he's
tough.
dealing with that,
and his dad dies.
Yeah, his dad dies, and that's why he's gone. Like,
yeah.
Right before she dies, I believe. Yeah.
Well, then it's like, dang, he feels like more connected because he was the first person who got to give blood, like the transfusion thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, yeah, we were all going to give blood, though. I mean, they didn't want to have to do that, but, obviously these unfortunate things happen. And they're like, yeah, we're just not going to tell him, though, because we don't want, him to feel, like, less connected. And he's like, I feel like I should have a right to her journals because I married her because it's my blood in there. And then they're all like, so I guess she's my wife, too, then?
Yeah, like, we all gave her our AIDS, bro, so.
And also, we all just happen to be the same blood type.
Yeah.
To where this works.
Great. We all love her, and we all have the same blood, which I guess Quincy didn't love her, but he was just there.
He did.
He loved her, too? Oh, yeah, that's right.
He
was the other one.
He's the American
Quincy,
from Texas.
Seward, and then Arthur that all loved Lucy. So,
where
two
it
other
gets
things.
kind of dicey is where when Arthur's dad dies, he goes by Lord Holmwood. And that's when at first I was like, who is this? And then it's Arthur. Because when he takes his dad's title.
Yeah, that's right.
So that was the only confusing part to me at first, and then I caught on, and then I was good. But
yeah. So 2 things that I really enjoyed from Lucy's story was, one, you get a pretty good understanding of the fact that like once Dracula like bites a person essentially and the process starts, there's a pretty lengthy period before they actually become a fully undead vampire.
Yeah.
And there is a way to like bring them back. And like one of the biggest things is like if you can still see the holes, like there's still time. But once they close up, like we're too late. If we didn't already save her before those close up, like we're too late. So once you get to the point where it's too late for Lucy, it was heart-wrenching reading about Van Helsing being like, you can't kiss her yet, like all this stuff. And then once, like one of Lucy's last like lucid moments where the woman Lucy, not the undead vampire version of herself, once the woman Lucy like kind of has a moment, she thanks Van Helsing for
not
killing
letting
her. And
Oh.
like not letting her become a full vampire. And it's just one of those moments where you're like,
she thanks her too because she's like trying to kiss Arthur, and he's like, no, he like steps in, and is like, no, and then Arthur gets pissed, and then she's like, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, she's like, thank you, because she's like kind of going back and forth from knowing what's going on. So that was heart-wrenching, man, to see like, again, the true love come out, and like,
and her mom dies like right in front of her.
And
then who drugs does her mom drug the servants?
Bro, that was so confusing. I think that was something like her mom's like medicine or something, like got mixed in with something. I don't really understand.
So inconvenient.
I mean,
everybody's dropping dead, and then they're like, yo, the whole house is now all of a sudden locked down.
Yeah.
For the first time ever. It seems
these
like
doors
when we
have been
can't
unlocked
get in
for 200 years, and now nobody can get in anywhere.
Right when they need it bad.
When they need it the most.
Oh, man.
So that was tough, and that's the part that really, like, Jonathan Harker's story definitely does, but at least for me, you care so much about Lucy and just feel so sad that this is happening, because you don't really, like, once the process starts, they don't have a lot of control over it. Like, Dracula has like basically a way to tap into their mind and keep coming back, and they won't remember it and all this kind of stuff. So you feel really bad. You feel really bad for Arthur. I mean, his dad dies, and then he watches his fiance die and only gets to kiss her once, and then she's gone.
Yeah.
And then it's even tougher because, like,
bro, but which, first of all, did you catch that? I was reading it when I went back and looked at this, and I was like, wait, what? And it's when Mina comes in and is like consoling Arthur, and he like cries on her shoulder and all that, and then they kiss. It says, and then she kissed him, and like there's no like reference of like, did she kiss him on the cheek?
Yeah,
or it just says she kissed him, and I'm like, wait, who is this?
Yeah, you're like,
I'm like, what's going on, bro?
He's home alone. Like, golly, man, your girlfriend died. Let's make out. Like,
which I'm assuming it had to be on the cheek, but it just said, and then they kissed. Because I went back and looked specifically.
Because they do kind of slightly make a thing of it too.
Yeah.
So you get the idea that either they really kissed or like even just kissing on the cheek was like, wow, I just did
I can't
that
remember whose
moment.
POV that was. I might have been.
I thought it was Mina's.
And she's like, we kissed.
She's like,
underline.
Jonathan, if you read this, I kissed your boy all these years ago. So that's the Lucy thing. And then you kind of go from there, and Van Helsing kind of takes over this point. He's like,
well,
all right,
Dr.
this is
Seward's
for
in
sure.
there a lot too.
Yeah, Seward's in there a lot.
He was my favorite like person to read about personally, just because I thought the whole Renfield thing was really interesting. The way they do that with all the flies and the spiders, and him like having to intake life.
Yeah.
And then his back and forth with like being manic, and then like being like, no, I'm good, and like he like is all of a sudden very like logical and
when he's in that mode, he's like actually trying to help them. He's like, yo, something bad's coming.
Yeah, and
like
he gets
and then he just gets got.
Yeah.
But I thought that was really cool because you get the understanding of like the whole soul aspect of things.
Yeah.
Because not only does Van Helsing
like
ask
the
him
math
about
it, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, do you want to take a life? And he's like, yeah. He's like, but do you want to take a soul? And he's like, no. And so you get the idea that like even like before they're fully turned and stuff, like their soul is still in there, and that's still important to them. And that's how the religious theme comes into it, because they're worried the whole time, like if we don't kill these creatures, like their souls will be damned by God forever. Because of what they have become. So that's like a big part of it too, is like they're wanting to protect their like they get to the point where it's like, okay, your time on earth is numbered and it's not going to be good, but we can at least save your soul, so that God doesn't cast you into the lake of fire. So yeah, that's cool. Where are we at now with it?
So you said Van Helsing comes in. He's the one who kind of obviously is piecing everything together, and then that's when like Lucy's kind of on the run. They end up killing her, or Arthur, which that was kind of brutal that they made him do it.
But see, that was one of the parts that really got me too. Is like, it's
because especially the way Van Helsing proposes it, he's like, "You're going to do this, but it's because you're like freeing her soul." It's like, he makes it, which different.
Almost seems manipulative, and like you can make a joke about.
He's
but
because he has to do it more than once, dude.
Yeah, he has to absolutely annihilate her, then chop her head off. Like. But it again kind of brings you in the context of the story. You're like, oh, that like really is how he feels. Like, to stab a stake through the woman he loves, like, is a mercy, and like something he wants to be able to look back on and be like, I actually saved her in that moment. Like, I was the one that, saved her soul from eternal damnation or whatever, that kind of thing. So, but again, just kind of goes back to the context of the time. Like, if I'm in that situation, I was like, please somebody else do it, man. I don't even want to be here when this happens. But
and then the chopping the head off is just like, sure we have to do this? And then Van Helsing's like, then we all have to take a piss on her.
With garlic.
And like, he starts adding in things. We're like, I guess, man. It's like all these things. He just keeps getting worse and worse.
It's like the biggest thing that a vampire can't handle is a golden shower. Like, this will really solidify her in heaven if we be on her.
And
that did not happen in the book, by the way. Just to clarify,
like, we're gonna go stake to the chest, cut her head off, put garlic in her mouth, then we're gonna piss on her.
Yeah,
it's like,
and then we're gonna light her on fire and then throw her ashes into the water.
Exactly.
It's like, whoa. And then we're gonna kill everybody she's ever loved and all of her family. Oh, Van Helsing, please. And
but it'll save her soul.
I'm Dracula.
I know it with you.
Oh God. Okay, so Van Helsing kind of takes over, and this is where like.
Then you have the Avengers, dude.
I mean, the Avengers get together.
They squad
all
up.
of Lucy's lovers, Jonathan, Mina, and Van Helsing.
Yeah.
All get together. So I guess we can kind of talk about those characters a little bit more. Like, who was your favorite character to like get a POV from?
So Seward was definitely my favorite. I liked him the most. I mean, Harker, like, obviously the first chapters at Bank, like when he's in Transylvania, I liked that a lot. Yeah. When he comes back, like, I still like him, but it's harder to like honestly get to me. Like whenever I read a Seward like entry, it's like so him. Like I really get his character personified.
Yeah.
Whereas I got that in Transylvania with Harker, but like when he comes back, I would say Mina is the second person where like if I were to read it, I'm like, that's Mina.
Yeah.
So Harker, like to me, I kind of lose his voice almost, if that makes sense. Like it's still interesting, like what's happening, but it's less like, oh, that's so John.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
it's more like
that's so Seward.
It's more just like, oh, okay, it's just the continuation of the story.
Yeah.
And it's not that it wasn't characteristic of him. It's just his character was just harder to like, I think, dictate the path of like, oh, this is what he is and how he's going to do things.
Well, it's also a big tone thing because Harker has gone through
so.
Like so much, and he has like a very unique perspective on it, where he was stuck in Dracula's castle, saw all these horrible things, then thought he was insane for the longest time.
Yeah, he's like, I dreamed it.
Yeah, he was like, and then
really.
Finally he gets vindicated like months after the fact, or however long it is.
Yeah.
So you just get I feel like you get a much more like darker vibe from him, like just because he's been through it, and he's like, he's got such a more personal like hatred for Dracula and what he's doing. So yeah, I agree. Seward was my favorite, and just because I agree with you.
Had probably some of the best quotes, I would say that.
Yeah, well, to stick on Seward, bro, he had my favorite quote in the book, and this is actually from the moment you were just talking about when he's talking with Lucy about he's talking with Mina about losing Lucy, and he's talking about how like sad he is, but then he says, and this is kind of a lengthier quote, but it's so good. This is his response to like her talking about his sorrow and misery and like how horrible it must be, and he's like, "It is a strange world, a sad world, a world full of miseries and woes and troubles. And yet when King Laugh come, he make them all dance to the tune he play. Bleeding hearts and dry bones of the churchyard and tears that burn as they fall, all dance together to the music that he make with that smileless mouth of him. Ah, we men and women are like ropes drawn tight with strain that pulls us different ways. Then tears come, and like the rain on the ropes, they brace us up until perhaps the strain become too great and we break. But King Laugh he come like sunshine, and he eased off the strain again, and we bear to go on with our labor, what it may be." Dude, that quote, when I read that or heard that in the book, I rewinded like 4 times and just listened to that actor say those lines again, and it was just like a really cool take. He's like, yeah, like life is so tough, things are horrible, but like when joy and laughter are around, it can suck you right out of that. So it's really cool to see, like, I mean, he's mourning over his dead fiance, and he's like, yeah, I'm super sad. Yeah, this is I'm sorry. He's mourning over a woman that he loved.
Okay, I was like, wait,
I should say, sorry. Because he did love her.
He did, yeah.
You kind of know
he was the first one, I think, to propose to her.
Yeah, I believe so. And he struggled with it because he had to come, like, take care of her, and he was having a really hard time, and you get that vibe.
Yeah.
So when she dies, this is, like, his quote before, Mina cheats on Jonathan with him and gives him a peck.
Can you imagine, though, like, being madly in love with some girl, proposing to her, and, like, in the nicest way possible, she's like, I can't. I haven't, because he, like, I think even is like, is it because of another? She's like, yeah, and he's like, well then I think they both kind of do that. They're both like, as long as it's another, that's okay. Yeah. And then to have to like essentially nurse them back to health. It's like, it's like, no, go find someone else. Actually,
like, bro, are there no other doctors around here? Does that have to be?
And
me?
I work at an asylum, so why are you guys coming to me for health issues? I know I'm a doctor, but I guess just because I'm a doctor of mental health, somehow, I just know everything in this town. It's me or no one.
Yeah,
so.
It's me or you're getting like the churchyard like grave digger or something to help out with this. So yeah, just to mention that really quickly, I loved Seward's, all of his stuff. I loved Mina's, dude. Every time a Mina
was good,
excerpt or whatever chapter came up, I loved her.
I feel like she kind of carries the book.
Yeah, Mina's.
I don't know if that's true or not, but I feel like she has the most entries.
Yeah, I would be curious. Let me look that up real quick.
I could see it being Mina, then Seward, then like Loki. Van Helsing has a lot towards the end. I feel like his are always shorter though. I feel like, so maybe it's not as long. Like if we're talking about the length of them, whoever has the most words, because Van Helsing's, I feel like his were always kind of short, and then Mina's were always long. Maybe that's why.
I can't find that answer really easily, but it did feel like Mina had a lot. I felt like Seward had a ton.
Yeah, I would probably say Mina, Seward, then Helsing, and then Harker.
Yeah.
Obviously, Lucy has to be last. There's no way she has more than anyone because she died so early.
Yeah.
Dude, how about, I mean, this is, again, kind of jumping, but freaking Quincy just getting savaged at the end for like honestly kind of no reason. It's like, why did he have to die?
Yeah, and it's like he didn't even get killed by Dracula. He got killed by some
gypsies.
Gypsy.
I'm like, why? First of all, these gypsy like. This is the 1900s, but I mean, just savaging the gypsies by making it like, no, they're gonna fight to the death over something that they don't even know what's going on.
They have no idea. They just need this paycheck in order to get back home. It's like, whoa. Yeah, that part was crazy. To kind of before we get to that part, I mean, I'm trying to think like a lot of this point, like after Lucy dies and the Avengers get together, it's like it's a mystery at that point. They're just trying to like track down and figure out what to do. The way they do that is really cool because eventually Mina herself does also get bit, and the process starts where she's about to become undead, but they use it to their advantage this time.
Because she, like, freaking slurps up some of his blood.
Yeah, it goes, like, in a deep detail. Like, he sucks her blood, and then he cuts open his chest and shoves her into his bosom and makes her... She literally says, I either had to suffocate or drink his blood, because he was, like, ramming her face into his chest and making her drink it.
As old Johnny B or Johnny H is just on the edges.
He's just over there dreaming of Lucy or something. Who knows? But shoot, what was I about to say? Oh, it's cool how like they use her to like her connection to Dracula to kind of track what he's doing. They figure out he's on a ship trying to make his way back to Transylvania. So,
dude, to me, I wonder if have you ever read Harry Potter? Have you seen all of them at least? Dude,
I've seen the last 4, I know, and the last 2 I thought were
the last
great.
4.
Yeah, I saw the last 2. The first Harry Potter movie I saw.
That's probably the best way you could do it. Honestly, the first ones are not good. Like this is gonna probably get hate, but they're so childish.
They're child movies.
Nothing even happens in them. But the last ones are when stuff happens. But you know how Harry like has a connection to Voldemort, where like he can see in, and
he is one of the Horcruxes.
He is, which is crazy. But that's like why Dumbledore like distances himself. I think that's in. I think the 5th one. Anyway,
the Half-Blood Prince or whatever. Which one?
Maybe, yeah. And so he's like, "Why are you being distant from me?" And it was because he thought like, "Oh, Voldemort could see what's going on." And I wonder if she read J.K. Rowling, that is, if she read Dracula and was like, this whole connection between, because then they like kind of leave her out of some stuff because they think, oh wait, because Dracula like kind of detours once, and they're like, how did he figure that out?
Because they're like, well, if she has a connection to him, he probably has a connection.
Exactly.
To her.
Which is like what ends up happening in Harry Potter. So it's just kind of interesting. Like when I read that, that's immediately what I thought of, was that kind of connection to the villain, which I think is kind of a cool.
Yeah. And just really quickly, since you brought it up, the first Harry Potter I saw was when Deathly Hallows Part 1 came out. First one I saw. And I was like...
You saw Deathly Hallows Part 1?
It's the first one I saw. And I was
wow.
like, whoa. So then after I saw that, I was like, oh, I definitely want to see the next one. So let me go back and just watch 4 and 5.
The last ones are really dark.
Yeah,
I haven't read them all. I've only read the first 4, I think, and my parents read them all this year. And I mean, obviously, like how it always is, the books are way better. So like the movies are good, obviously, but the books, like, just so much happens. And they said that, I mean, obviously, you can tell in the last movies it gets really dark. Yeah. They said the books are like so dark.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, the scene that gets me every time, and this is coming from a person who hadn't seen all the movies, hadn't read any of the books, dude, when Dumbledore and Snape are talking, and Dumbledore finds out, like, he's like, it was you, Lily? And he finds out that Snape, like, loved Harry Potter's mom all this time, and he's like, always. And he sends, like, the deer ghost spirit thing to go, like, save Harry Potter. That's just such an emotional scene, because the whole time,
you're talking about when Harry finds out that Snape...
No, it's when Dumbledore and Snape are talking.
Yeah, but Dumbledore always knew about Snape.
No, but I'm saying, no, not that he finds out Snape is good, that he finds out that, like,
just
he's
Snape,
the one
just
sending
kind of
this thing to
confessing.
protect
like,
him,
as a
like,
viewer, you realize that it's Snape.
Yeah, that's when, as a viewer, you find out that he loved Harry Potter's mom, and that he's been sending that freaking, like, spirit thing. The thing that Harry Potter thinks is his mom, coming from, like, the netherworld, is actually Snape, like, protecting him. And you're like...
Dude, he's one of the best characters, like, one of the deepest characters, like... I feel like, honestly, in all... Yeah, Snape, dude, just because the whole time, like, throughout the whole series, you think he's... Because he's, like, a double agent.
Yeah, because he is, like, Voldemort.
He's one of the freaking, like, whatever. I mean, we're going to get butchered for not knowing all the terms, because
those
people are, like, deep in this. But, yeah, he's, like, a part of...
Voidbringers or whatever they are.
Dude, he's part of Bridge 4, dude.
He's working for Odium, but he's really working for Honor.
So, I mean, his character, though, I mean, and that actor, because I will say, hot take, Daniel Radcliffe is a terrible Harry Potter.
Really? Like as a book reader?
I just don't think I don't think he's a good actor. I don't think he does well at all. Like I think he's carried that. I think the rest of that cast,
well,
like dude, like
the
Snape
tough.
guy is so good.
Alan
dude.
Rickman, which he's dead now, I think.
Yeah, I saw he died a couple, like maybe 2 years ago, which is tough.
But it's tough when you start a series with children and you're like, all right, you're going to be an actor in this series for 15 years, and it's like they're a child actor, so who knows what's going to happen. They turn out not to be a good actor. Like, that's
like the Malfoy kid, great actor. You like hate him. I mean, it's just Harry's just like, I think anyone could have done that.
Like
but again,
Watson,
that's my hot take.
Great.
Yeah.
And then you got Rupert Grint, and you're just like, I can't tell if he's a horrible actor or if he's doing a perfect job. Like, I can't tell. Because he ended up being in a show that I watched, Servant, which was really good until the end. Horrible ending, but he does great in that.
Really? Well, the thing is like, name another movie Daniel Radcliffe's been in that's good. Where he's like,
where
it's like
another movie he's been in,
Spy Kids 4 or whatever. I mean, dude, he's in like,
was he really?
Dude, he's in all these movies, and it's like he's so bad. He's in the second Now You See Me. Dude, he's so bad. Every time you see him, yeah.
Wow, with like Jesse Eisenberg in them,
the freaking magician movie. Yeah, he's like the son of the. Yeah, he's the son of like this entrepreneur guy who they're like
Morgan
savaging.
Freeman's son in that movie.
No, it's the dude who's freaking Batman's
the way that
Wilson or not Wilson, dude.
What's happening? The way that we're trying to pull these references out.
I honestly might have Alzheimer's, dude. I'm getting worse and worse at recall of like terms and stuff. Alfred is what I meant to say. It's Alfred is like the bad guy. And,
he's like the billionaire that they stole from.
Yeah, and it's his son. And it is freaking Daniel Radcliffe. And
I don't remember that
so
character
bad.
at all.
Oh, because it's terrible, bro. The movie is pretty good, but he's so, like, everybody else is solid, but he's so bad, dude.
Yeah, and then Edward Cullen's in one of the movies. He pops out of nowhere and gets killed after he wins the broomstick game.
See, but he does good, though. The thing is like, he actually is a good actor.
Twilight was just rough.
Yeah, but I think he probably still, like, if we're going for like whatever Twilight is, like, I think he does a good job in Twilight, like as an actor. I would say
it's just
the story
Twilight's
is
just one of the most
is,
memeable like movie series ever. Like I see clips of Twilight all the time of people just making fun of it, and you're like, yeah, that seems out of context. That's so bad. Like they're just sitting there like. And it's just like really
especially
weird.
when it's just the graphics and the CGI of them like running fast. And, like,
I will say to be completely off subject about a movie. I mean, it is at least about vampires. It is a rendition of vampire stuff. This is another series where I hadn't watched the other movies. I had seen the first one, I'm pretty sure, and then I saw the last one in theaters with some friends. And bro, when they trick you in the end of those movies, and
are you talking about Twilight?
Yeah,
okay,
and they make you think everybody's dying in that scene in the end. I was like, wow, these movies are actually lit. People are getting their heads ripped off, and then it's like, bro, she just saw a vision of the future. It was I was pissed, bro. I was like, these movies would have been so good. The stakes are so high. Carlisle just got beheaded. I mean, anyway.
I haven't seen those in forever, dude. I just remember like Dakota Fanning or something.
Those movies suck. Don't
like
get me wrong. But that scene was wild.
Yeah.
I mean, Taylor Lautner, if you want to talk about bad acting, I mean, bro, that guy's a bad actor. I mean,
you sure boy love a girl? Come on, man. That's on my freaking top 5.
Dude. Oh, that's so funny. All right. Getting back to Dracula.
Let's finish Dracula here. I would say great book. Read it for sure.
Well, let's talk about the end. We didn't hit the end.
Oh, yeah.
So basically they figure out where Dracula's going. It's a little confusing to me how they figure out exactly where he's going to end up being, but the culmination of it's really cool. You have the POV of Mina and Van Helsing in one spot, and then the 4 other dudes are in 2 groups, 2 and 2, and they just all start running up on this gypsy group. And the way she explains it, like how no matter what happens, even when Quincy ends up getting stabbed in the side, like they just do not give up. They're like, you can just see it on their face. Like, we're killing Dracula, even if it takes our lives. Like, it's pretty impactful, pretty intense scene. It does kind of end quickly. Like they stab him, he disappears, and it's like,
and they mourn what's his face's death.
We're done.
And he's like, oh yeah, your scar's gone, Mina, you're good, I guess.
And it was nice. He was like, this was worth dying for. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, what else did he have? I mean,
not the girl he loved.
Or Bram out here, showing the Americans some love by making him the honor guy who's going to sacrifice his life.
Yeah.
He didn't have to do that.
That was very American of him.
Yeah, he didn't have to do that for Texas.
For Texas. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much the synopsis of the book. Kind of some other things like that I just thought were interesting. Bram Stoker. Well, one thing I learned, I told Taylor the other day, I told her that like I was just talking about the book, and I told her that that Dracula was based on Vlad the Impaler. He's not. That's like a common misconception.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he was not based off him because Vlad the Impaler they thought he drank people's blood and all this stuff. And I can't even remember, bro. Is Dracula's name in the book Vlad? They never say his first name. They just say Count Dracula.
I think so, yeah.
So Vlad Tepes Dracula, which is another thing you hear in Castlevania, he was not based off Vlad the Impaler.
They just kind of combined two theories there.
Yeah.
I mean, Vlad the Impaler was crazy, though.
Insane. It would make sense if he was actually Dracula.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the book. I'm sure we're missing some things. I mean, as far as themes, like the main ones I have here are religion, superstition, imprisonment, and love. Love obviously is hit super hard. It's very obvious, the characters that love each other. We've kind of talked about religion and superstition, like these are like Catholic Christian people. They've got crosses. They're all about the soul and that kind of thing.
Chivalry.
Imprisonment's a cool one, a cool theme, because you have like not only Jonathan Harker being imprisoned in Castle Dracula, then you have Renfield being imprisoned in the insane asylum, but then you have Lucy and Mina basically being imprisoned in themselves and like getting taken over, not having control over themselves, like at night specifically, like not remembering what happened when Dracula's there. So a lot of cool themes in that regard. I was trying, there was one more quote that I really wanted to say. I mean, this seems like such a cliche at this point because everybody kind of knows this, and there's a lot of other ways to say it, like you know, flowers only grow after it rains kind of thing. But Van Helsing has a thing where he says we learn from failure, not from success. And maybe in 1897 that was a fairly new thing to say. I don't know. But the way Van Helsing says it in there is like...
That was like the YOLO of 2012.
That was the YOLO
or whenever that
was. Of 1897. So yeah, I think I want to get into... If you're interested, some renditions that I really like to get into some.
So renditions, and I'm gonna quiz you.
Okay, cool. So my favorite, like, if I'm to just say, so I'll just kind of say what I have. So there's a show just titled Dracula that came out in 2020 on Netflix. It's very, very good, but it definitely delves into a lot of things that are not in the book, but it relies heavily on the themes. You've seen it all? Yeah, dude, it is. Okay, it's very, very good. The guy that plays Dracula, like...
Is it real life?
Absolutely kills it. Yeah, it's live action. The most standout character to me was actually Sister Agatha, who we talked about, the one that in the book is writing letters to Mina about Jonathan.
Yeah.
Bro, in this show, Dolly Wells plays her. Bro, I mean, some of the best like acting and like just the most connection like you feel to a character in a show like that. But it's really cool. Like it definitely veers off from the book, and like it starts like when it starts in the book, and not to like spoil anything, but it goes a lot further than where the book ends. It does not end the same. Dracula makes it a lot longer, and so it's just a really cool take on it. And again, it's live action. It's really good. So there's that one. I'm gonna do my favorite one last. There's an animated show also on Netflix called Castlevania. Did you end up watching it?
I watched the first episode, yeah.
Dude, it's really good, man. It's really good. And it's based off, like, Dracula. And it goes into a lot more stuff, but Dracula kind of is the focal point and kind of the starting of the rest of the story. He's not fully involved in the whole story. He's mostly involved in the first 2 seasons, but great show. There's Dracula Untold with Luke Evans.
That's one I've seen, yeah.
And this one's really cool because...
That was more the Vlad Impaler side, I think.
Well, yeah, so Luke Evans, the main character, is Vlad the Impaler, but he meets the original Dracula. And so that Dracula tells you, and I kind of like this origin story. Yeah.
Okay.
Dude, it's great. I've seen it several times. It's good, and it was supposed to be like the start of this whole monster universe that they were building movies around. And basically,
because what was the rule of it? He like gives him this power so that he can... Because the one dude takes his son... When it's like, dude, come on, man.
Like, bro, you really gonna go
and
after
so
the kid?
then he kills the guys, and then it's like, okay, well, now he's screwed. But
yeah, but the deal he makes to him is like, you can have this power, but eventually I'm gonna need something from you, and you are gonna be compelled.
But there was like one rule that he couldn't do, and he does it, and it like makes it to where he now it like has to switch places essentially with.
Well, no, So the rule is, he said, you can have this power for 3 days. And if you go 3 days without drinking blood, you'll lose the power. That's what it was. but he ends up needing the power.
That's
on
what
that
it
third
was.
day.
Yeah.
So he's like, dang it, let me drink. And it's actually really sad. I won't spoil it for anybody, but it's really sad how it turns out. Charles Dance plays Dracula. He's called the Master Vampire in the movie. But he is Dracula. He's a great actor. You'll know him from Game of Thrones as Tywin Lannister if you've seen the show. Great actor. Sarah Gadon plays Marina, who is Vlad the Impaler's wife. She's awesome at everything she's in. So this one's really, really good. I'd recommend that movie. It's not a very long movie. I think it's like an hour and 20 minutes or something. And then the absolute best, and this isn't about Dracula at all. It's just about vampires. The best vampire movie that's ever been made, and I will physically fight someone on this hill, is 30 Days of Night. This movie is so good, dude. Oh my God, you haven't seen 30 Days of Night?
I've never even heard of it, yeah.
So this is an R-rated movie. It's a horror movie. It's really violent. It's not like a horror, like jump out scary movie, but it is like disturbing. But it's basically in Alaska, you know, they have like a month where the sun doesn't rise.
Yeah.
And so that's when these like vampires come out and start going crazy. And oh my God, I just realized who that girl was. She's in another show. But man, it's just so creepy. It's like, okay, if vampires were real, this is probably what it would be like, and we would not stand a chance if we were stuck in 30 Days of Night. So highly, highly recommend that one more than anything else.
I see. You're in 30 Days of Night.
If you're into animation type stuff, Castlevania is really good, and then the Dracula show is great. Dracula Untold is good. So those are kind of the renditions that came to mind. Obviously, there's a lot of vampire stuff out there. There's
one of my favorite books of all time, Empire of the Vampire.
There you go.
It's so good.
That's in your top 10, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember what it was, like 7 or ish, something like that. Oh, it's so good. Because I think a lot of people talk about how vampires are like normally not done that well in literature. Yeah. But Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff is amazing. The second book's coming out next year, early next year too. Yeah. So.
And then obviously there is, and I don't know if you've seen this either, there's the Gary Oldman, like Bram Stoker's Dracula is the title of the movie. And Gary Oldman plays Dracula, my favorite actor. That one's great. It's a classic.
I'll
So
see that one.
Those are kind of the renditions. Just to talk about Bram Stoker again, just a couple of cool things I found out. He never actually visited Transylvania, so like his whole place that like the origin of the story was based on, he wasn't actually very familiar with. He was a very sickly person. He had like gout and then this other unknown illness where like for the first bit of his life he couldn't walk, like throughout a lot of his childhood.
Sounds like polio.
Yeah. He had a bunch of different ideas before the novel that is Dracula became like what it was. Like at first, like there was an early idea where there was a dinner party at Dr. Seward's house and like all the guests are telling strange stories and then their stories connect and then Dracula just shows up and crashes the party and then you find out like, oh, like all these stories we have are related to this guy, and then he comes and kind of wrecks stuff. It was translated into Icelandic and it completely changed the story. There was a lot more like gore and eroticism. It cut the length of the novel, removed multiple narrators and that kind of stuff, but some people like it better. Stoker wrote a Dracula play and it didn't do well, and then the other one was Dracula wasn't based on Vlad the Impaler. I saw that one and I was like, idiot.
He wrote a book called that?
No, I'm saying there was just another fact on here that Dracula was not based on Vlad the Impaler. And then, he was like an assistant. He worked for Sir Henry Irving, which I don't know why I know that name, but I do. I looked him up. He was just like a stage actor in the 1890s or whatever, and I guess really famous. And I think that's kind of all I have. Do you have anything else on Dracula other than the questions? Trying to quiz me real quick?
Yeah, I'll quiz you because we've been going for a minute.
Yeah, we have been.
All right. So, just to preface this is stuff on Spark Notes. We'll test Jesse to see how much he paid attention when reading / listening. This is
not going to be good.
I think you'll do well. All right, question 1. At the inn in Bistritz, so like in the very beginning, first chapter, what does the innkeeper's wife give Harker to keep him to help him on his journey to Castle Dracula? A flask of Romanian wine, a map of the region, a bilingual dictionary, or a crucifix?
A crucifix.
Correct. Nice,
go.
1 for 1. Harker reports that the Count's English estate is rather isolated and neighbored only by what institution? A morgue, an insane
MIT.
asylum, a prison, or a brothel? Come on,
A morgue.
What?
Wait.
Harker reports the Count, so Count Dracula's English estate is rather isolated and neighbored by only by what institution? A morgue, an insane asylum, a prison, or a brothel?
An insane asylum.
Yeah, okay.
I like
That's
how
crucial
you gave
to
me
the
that
story.
answer. Yeah, might be.
Despite Dracula's warning, Harker falls asleep in a forbidden part of the castle. Who or what nearly attacks him there?
The wives.
Yeah, 3 voluptuous women is the answer it has here. How does Dracula react when Harker requests to leave the castle immediately? He refuses, telling Harker to prepare to die. He summons a seductive woman to distract Harker. He opens the door, or he puts Harker into a deep trance. I actually don't know.
Opens the door because he tells him to go. He's like, yeah, go ahead. And then you just hear wolves howling and like all these creepy sounds.
And he's like, all right, I'm good.
I think I'll go back.
That's true. What name is given to the mysterious woman suspected of abducting children from Hampstead Heath? The Bloofer Lady? The Hampstead Horror?
The Bloofer Lady.
Why did that have to be first? What does Mina give Van Helsing to aid his investigation into the strange circumstances surrounding Lucy's death? A silver crucifix, a large check, her husband's journals, her complete correspondence with Lucy?
Her husband's journals.
That one's kind of a tricky one. I feel like I would have picked the other one.
Lucy's?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is responsible for the scar on Mina's forehead? A communion wafer, a crucifix, Dracula's teeth, or Count Voldemort's curse?
Was it Voldemort's curse? The crucifix, right?
It was.
Like burning her head. Is it the wafer?
Yeah, it's the wafer.
Okay.
Dude, those wafers.
Those freaking vanilla wafers.
Oh,
those are the Superman of this story.
For real. What do Mina... Oh, this will be the last one. What do Mina and Jonathan Harker name their child?
Quincy. Apparently he had like multiple names, but they called him Quincy, and that was one of the names. The way they said it is like they named him every character in the story. Like his name was like Van Helsing, Seward,
Lucy.
Thanks,
that
Rush.
Scared me, dude. Oh,
Rush.
I thought it was Dracula.
Rush. I don't want him to bark again, and you have to like edit out this noise. Rush. Hey, Rush. Rush.
Rush.
Just Jeb downstairs. Come here. Come here.
He's scared of Dracula.
Featuring my beautiful, lovely pupper. He's a 8-year-old pit lab mix, and he will kill your dog if he sees him. But he loves people. Man, I saw this thing the other day. Who was it talking? 2 like famous people, like going back and forth about how it's absolutely ridiculous for people to own pit bulls, and I was so mad. I was like, why are you so scared? What are you scared of?
If they're trained or not.
But see, they didn't have that take. Like they were like, oh, people say it's all about the owner. It's not. They're violent, horrible dogs. And it's like golden retrievers have bit more people than any other dog. The dog that everybody sees as like the most nice, lovely dog has attacked people more than pit bulls. The problem with pit bulls is they're very strong.
I thought you were going to say something else.
They're very strong, and their jaws are very strong. So when they do attack, it's usually worse. That's why people remember them. So do your research, kids. If you're scared of a pit bull, be a bitch and don't have one. But don't start talking shit to anybody else that has one. Because my pit bull has never even remotely attacked a human. Now, he's been ganged up by some other dogs, and he took care of business, but never a human. Anyway.
Oh, God.
All right, anything else on Dracula? We both highly recommend. We both loved it. Especially the Audible.
The reading of it's great. If you're looking for a classic to start, it's good. I mean, honestly, with October coming up, I mean, like I said, I mean, I could see myself reading this yearly. It's that good to me. And it's such a quick read, and it's so creative the way it's written. It's so refreshing to kind of read this after reading either a nonfiction where it's just information overload in a direct way, or most fantasy where it's third person and it's just totally different. So it's a good palate cleanser, I would say. And it's very just creative the way it's written.
Yeah, and just from a literary sense, like it seems so foundational, and you can kind of like, especially if it's anything in this vein, like classics or fiction or gothic or anything, you can kind of base like everything off this book, like as to whether or not like it holds true to the standard. Yeah. Especially if it gets like to real big world, crazy, fantastical stuff, it's like, okay, it's a lot different. But it just felt like such a perfectly isolated, but also very intriguing. Like the supernatural was never too much. It always felt very grounded. So I mean, I'd recommend it to anybody. You obviously feel the same. I definitely think after reading the book, or maybe before, whatever you want to do, you should check out some of these renditions if you're into vampire stuff.
It's like honestly one of my like favorite enjoyment like books I've read.
Yeah,
like it really is. Like if you're going off pure enjoyment, like I don't know if it's in my top 10, but like honestly, it's close. Like it's close enough to where it's like, is it in my top 10? Like I'm like having to think it because it could be. I don't think it is, but like it's good enough to where I could see. Like I said, I mean, it's just more refreshing in a sense of maybe it's not my top 10, but it's one of the few books like I would read every year.
Yeah, like it for me. Like if I'm categorizing like classics and legendary books, I don't think it surpasses Count of Monte Cristo. If it doesn't, it's my number 2. And Count of Monte Cristo is so different and way longer. So if we're talking about like books that you can read in less than 10 years.
The concept of Count of Monte Cristo is really cool, but I like Dracula a lot more than Count of Monte Cristo, dude. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And that's just, it's not, I don't know. It's just, I think reading the unabridged version was a dagger for me.
Yeah, I mean, it was deep.
I kind of wish we would have not done that because it kind of ruined my enjoyment of the story.
But we felt like we needed to do that. We were like, oh, dude, we're so
let's
smart.
Read 1,000 pages of just...
Took us a while, too. We were struggling. I mean, I got halfway through that book, and I was like, halfway? I'm halfway. I mean, that thing was thick, dude. It was one of those books where once you start reading it, the spine can never go back to normalcy because it's just so thick and puts so much weight on it.
Mine is.
Yeah, I don't know where mine is. See, mine's downstairs.
Mine's like a cinder block, dude. What did I do with it? I don't know where it's at.
Yeah, who knows?
Oh, well.
So are we jumping straight into our next segment then?
Yeah, we might as well.
All right, so that's Dracula. Hope you enjoyed. Now we're going to...